right, it is 10 a.m., so we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this talk sponsored by the Institute of World Politics. For those of you that are new here, IWP is a graduate school of national security, intelligence, and international affairs. We offer a doctoral program, 7 master's degree programs, including 2 that are online, and 18 certificates of graduate study. If you are at all interested in learning more about us, please feel free to visit iwp.edu. To support the work of IWP, please feel free to visit iwp.edu/donate. Today, we'll be hearing from Dr. Norman Bailey, who will discuss the economic situation in the Mena region. This lecture is part of a series on the Mena region, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is part 5. A little bit about Dr. Bailey. He's an adjunct professor of economics and national security at IWP and a professor of economic statecraft at the Galilee International Management Institute. Dr. Bailey was a senior staff member of the National Security Council during the Reagan administration and of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence during the George W. Bush administration. If you are joining us here on Zoom this morning, please send in your questions via the Q&A function. And for those of you joining us on our live stream on Facebook, feel free to add any questions in the comment section. With that, please welcome Dr. Bailey.
Thank you very much, Sean, and welcome everyone to the 5th and the 6th lecture series on the Mena region. As usual, I'm going to start with a very brief review of the Mena region for the benefit of any of you who may not have attended earlier, after which I will talk about some of the events that have taken place in the Mena region since last month's lecture. And then we'll move into, if there are no, after some questions and comments about that, if there are any, we'll move into the main topic of today's lecture, the economic situation in the Mena region today. Okay, the Mena region, Middle East, North Africa, extends from Morocco in the west all the way to Iran in the east, and is 18 countries in all. Of those 18 countries, 15 are predominantly Arab, or in many cases almost completely Arab. The exceptions are Israel, which is Jewish, majority Jewish, Turkey, and Iran. A majority of the countries of the Mena region, as a matter of fact, all but one, are predominantly Muslim countries. The one exception is, of course, Israel, which is predominantly a Jewish country. There are large ethnic groups in the Mena region that don't have a country of their own, of which the most important are the Kurds, who live in Iran, Iraq, Syria, predominantly, and the Berbers, who live in North Africa, in the South Saharan region, and were the descendants of the original inhabitants of the region before the Arabs conquered it in the 7th century CE. The Kurds and the Berbers are both Sunni Muslims, and having said that all but one of the countries in the Mena region predominantly Muslim, I must state a very important factor, and that is that the Muslims are divided between the variety of Islam and the Shia variety of Islam, which cordially hate each other and consider each other to be heretics. Iran is the principal Shia country, but there are many Shia also in Iraq, which is a majority Shia, in Bahrain, which is a majority Shia, also in Syria and in Lebanon. There are also substantial Christian communities in Egypt, about 10 million Christians in Egypt, and a substantial community of Christians in Lebanon. In the rest of the MENA region, the Christian religion has just about been eliminated. Okay, events since our last talk in August, there are many and very significant ones. We're going to start with the situation in Iraq. There was an election in Iraq, and I have to say that Iraq is one of the few countries in the Middle East where the elections are free and fair, and it resulted in the largest segment of the Iraqi parliament being dominated by the Sadristas, that are the Shia followers of Muqtada al-Sadr, who is a very important Shia leader, but who is anti-Iran. He is in favor of the Shia of Iraq being entirely separate from the Shia of Iran. However, the pro-Iranian Shia parties managed to get the Iraqi Supreme Court to declare that in order to form a government, al-Sadr had to have 2/3 majority in the parliament. This was impossible. As a result of this, he withdrew his members of parliament and he withdrew from politics. Following which, his followers went out on the streets rioting, but he soon put a stop to that. And the current situation is, as a result of this, Iraq is unable to form a government, so that it's a temporary ad hoc government that's ruling Iraq at the present time. This is very serious because Iraq is very much of a linchpin in the Middle East. This is something that needs to be followed very closely and is a very dangerous situation. Secondly, much more recently, the death of a Kurdish woman in Iran as a result of her being arrested and put into police custody because she was not wearing a head covering. The death of this woman in police custody has led to a situation, this just happened a few days ago, and it has led to a situation of massive protests, but not just in the Kurdish region, but also in the rest of Iran. And there are violent protests and demonstrations throughout the country at the present time. And this leads me to make an observation that I have made before in this series, but it behooves all of us to remember it. And that is that Iran, only about half of the population of Iran are ethnic Persians. The rest are a variety of minorities who put together make up about 50% of the population of the country. These are the Kurds, which we just mentioned, the Azeris, who are the people of the country of Azerbaijan, Sunni Arabs, and the Baluchis, who are in the southeast of the country. Put it all together, they make up about 50% of the population, and they all cordially, or the vast majority of them, cordially hate the current government in Iran. So that there is constant unrest and acts of terrorism and so on, anti-government, both in the Baluchi region, in the Arab region, and in the Kurdish region, not so much in the Azeri region. At any rate, this is something that needs to be followed very carefully because it can have eventually the possibility of destabilizing the Iranian government. And that brings the situation that hopefully the Western countries are preparing for, and that is if the regime should change in Iran, what would come after and what can the Western world do about it? This is a very, very important situation. Now, a couple of things that just happened within the last day or two. First of all, the Saudi press agency has issued an announcement that due to the intervention of the Crown Prince, Ukraine and Russia have had a prisoner exchange. And this is because, quoting the Arab agency, because of the Crown Prince's vast concern for human rights. And in connection with that, we should also point out that there have been some interesting other developments in Saudi Arabia, which we will be talking about in a minute. The other thing that happened very recently and within the last couple of years is that on the occasion of the celebration of the Day of Independence of Bahrain from Great Britain, the Iranians picked this occasion to reestablish their claim to Bahrain. Bahrain, of course, is an island off the Saudi coast in the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf, if you prefer. And it has for centuries been claimed by Iran. And in 1971, the government of the Shah recognized the independence of Bahrain, but the government put in place by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and which is still in power in Tehran, has renounced that recognition of the Bahraini independence and is now bringing the situation up again. And coupled with Raisi's, the president of Iran's extremely negative and aggressive address to the UN National General Assembly meeting just the other day, it indicates that the Iranian government may be being more aggressive internationally in order to draw the attention of the people of Iran away from the domestic situation. That would hardly be something that is unheard of. At any rate, the last thing I want to mention is a very interesting development in terms of Arab journalism. By and large, Arab journalism has traditionally been anti-West, anti-Israel, and pro-Palestinian. However, partially, I'm sure, as a result of the Abraham Accords, which was the topic of one of our talks in this series, there has been quite a change in in Arab journalism, and in a recent issue of the Jerusalem Post magazine, which every week has a section called Hot Off the Arab Press. It was very interesting. It was just this past Friday this came out. In a recent issue, an article from a Kuwaiti publication was entitled, "Israel has no alternative to escalation." This was referring to the Israeli raids on Iranian facilities at the Aleppo airport in Syria. That is something that a couple of years ago would be unthinkable. And the article went on to explain why the Israelis were perfectly justified in raiding the Aleppo airport and destroying these facilities and so on. Another article from Egypt I found very amusing about the change in government in England and the death of the Queen. And I quote from this article, Have we learned and benefited from the institutions left behind by the Brits in Egypt? I don't think so. I know that the Indians, who are also subjected to British occupation, learned three important things from the English language, administration, and democracy. So what have we learned? Unquote. And finally, an article from the Saudi press extolling the freedom of the press, which, of course, does not exist in Saudi Arabia, which makes it somewhat ironic. But none of these would have been published had approved them, and then none of them would have been written 3 or 4 years ago. It simply would have been impossible, and so on. So at this point, let me pause and find out from Sean if there are any questions or comments about what I've said so far.
You're all good. No questions or comments so far.
Okay. In that case, we will move into the main topic of our talk today, which is the economic situation in the MENA region. First, a little background. For 400 years, until the early 20th century, the entire region, with the exception of Morocco, Oman, and Iran, was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was not noted for being progressive in any way, including the economic. And the whole region was a backwater from the economic standpoint. A few exceptions that were prized by the rest of the countries in the world, such as Persian rugs and pistachios, long staple cotton from Egypt. But by and large, the whole region was stagnant, and as a result of the Ottoman domination. When these countries first came under Western domination as mandates, or later when they became independent, they benefited from the change in the world's energy situation, which meant that the oil and gas finds that took place in the MENA region, particularly in the Middle East, but also in North Africa to a substantial extent, caused a very, very interesting, very significant and change in the economic situation of the entire area. Those countries with oil and gas reserves became wealthy, while most of the others continued to stagnate, I should say. There was one change in the post-World War II situation when Israel entered the scene and became a major high-tech center, which is the basis of its prosperity, along with the recent discovery and exploitation of offshore gas fields. More recently, the Ukraine war has affected the region favorably with the increase in energy prices, and negatively with the increase in grain prices, especially wheat. The entire region has excess energy sources and is deficient in grain production. So that the Ukraine war has both good and bad aspects from the standpoint of the economic situation. I'm going to rank the MENA countries in a way of ranking them in terms of whether they're upper class, middle class, lower class, or extreme poverty. I'm going to call the MENA countries upper class that have a per capita GDP, gross domestic product, over 50,000 US dollars. And these are Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. It will not escape the attention of you that every one of these countries is rich in oil and gas reserves, and they're all in the Arabian Peninsula. This is the financial upper class of the MENA region. The middle class, with a per capita GDP between $20,000 and $50,000, are Israel, Iran, Oman, and Turkey. Now, of those four countries, Israel and Oman are doing well, Iran and Turkey are doing poorly, and Iran, due to the sanctions and to bad economic management, is close to falling into the lower class. The lower class of the MENA region countries with per capita GDP less than $20,000 are Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt. Will not have escaped your attention that every one of the North African Maghreb countries, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, are either in this category or even worse in the case of Libya. The countries that are in extreme poverty, and in many cases there's lacking of data, are Libya, Syria, and Yemen. Lebanon, incidentally, is in imminent danger of falling into this extreme poverty situation, which is a great tragedy because Lebanon was one of the wealthiest countries in the Middle East until it fell to Syrian occupation for almost 20 years, and then being occupied by Hezbollah, a terrorist organization which, for all practical purposes, dominates the country completely at this point. Libya is a unique situation because Libya is actually essentially now two countries, Eastern Libya and Western Libya. And because they have oil, it is fairly well off in comparison to the other extreme poverty countries, and so on. And probably, if it were united, it would come up to the lower class and join its Maghreb other colleagues, and so on. Okay, the MENA region today in economic terms. According to World Bank estimates, and all the estimates that I'm going to be talking about from now on are World Bank GDP estimates. According to the World Bank estimates, the region as a whole will grow by 5.2% in 2022. However, 11 of the MENA countries out of 18 may not exceed, even if they achieve this 5.2% or more, may not exceed their GDP levels prior to the COVID pandemic. In other words, their end of 2022 GDP level might not even be as great as it was in 2019. Social instability and political conflicts are holding back much of the region, as well as the pandemic, which also had a very serious effect on most of the region. Again, as was the case in the later 20th century. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer because of the increase in oil and gas prices as a result of the Ukraine war. The exceptions are Lebanon, which is now a middle-class country, which will soon fall into lower-class status, as I've already mentioned. Some of the richer countries are busily diversifying their economies against the day when oil and gas will no longer be as important. In this regard, we should note the contribution of the Abraham Accords between Israel and certain of the Arab countries, namely Bahrain, the UAE, and Morocco, in helping them to diversify their economies. And this has certainly proven to be highly successful so far, with many deals being made between the Israeli government and Israeli companies and the countries of the Abraham Accords. Okay, let's talk a bit then about the various MENA countries. And we'll start in the West and move east. Morocco. Despite the fact that Morocco is one of the MENA countries that has considerable degree of social stability and a semi-democratic political situation, the outlook is murky. Growth is slow because of drought, because of a high level of debt, 80% of GDP, and a negative commercial balance. Morocco is collaborating with the Israeli government and Israeli companies due to the Abraham Accord with Israel, and may help the situation. Nevertheless, this situation should be looked at very carefully because it is not a wealthy country. Nevertheless, as I pointed out, it has a relatively high level of social stability and a semi-democratic political system, and consequently, the future may be quite rosy if they succeed in diversifying their economy and going into new areas. Okay, next door, Algeria. Algeria is a stable dictatorship, and there has been little internal dissension in recent years. The economic outlet is fairly good because of oil and gas prices, despite the situation of drought. It's very difficult to predict anything about Algeria because it is it's a dictatorial country. It is very anti-Israeli, for example. It is not, however, subject to great social instability. The terrorist organizations are not involved to any great extent in Algeria. And as I say, the economic outlook is fairly good, even though Algeria imports a great deal of its grains. Tunisia is a very sad situation because following the so-called Arab Spring in 2011, which turned into the Arab nightmare in most of the area, Tunisia was one of the very few countries, along with Iraq, that actually developed a fairly democratic political system. That has now changed as of last year with the prime minister, the president, I'm sorry, enacting as the dictator of the country. According to the World Bank, Tunisia is expected to grow by 3%. which will not bring the economy back to the 2019 level. The social and political backsliding is a very serious situation. And since it is in our categories and a lower class country, there is the possibility of Tunisia degenerating into a failed state status. And unlike Algeria, there is considerable opposition to the new dictatorship in Tunisia, and that could result in extreme social instability. We've already mentioned Libya. If the current ceasefire holds between the western and eastern halves of the country, the outlook for growth is fairly good because of oil prices, despite the civil war that has been raging in the country for the last several years. Balanced by the negative effect of rising prices for imported wheat due to the Ukraine war. If the ceasefire does not hold, the country will revert to failed state status like the other failed states in the Mena region, Lebanon and Syria and Yemen. Prediction is very difficult. It's unlikely that the ceasefire will hold forever, in which case you really are dealing with two different countries, one of which has international recognition, the other doesn't, but it also has the support of Egypt, which is important. So that prediction becomes almost impossible. When we come to Egypt, the World Bank forecasts 5.5% GDP growth in 2022. Egypt is an extremely complex country from every standpoint. It is certainly one of the 4 or 5 most important countries in the MENA region. It has the largest population in the region and few resources. Now that's changed somewhat recently because of the discovery of natural gas offshore, and that will help somewhat. And of course, the revenues from the Suez Canal help. So you could consider that a natural resource if you want to. But other than that, it has a very large population of over 100 million people. And it has the problem now of the high price of grains because of the Ukraine war. Socially and politically, it has a relatively benign dictatorship and a fairly high degree of social stability, although we need not, I said a fairly high degree of social stability, because there's still important opposition to the military dictatorship from the Muslim Brotherhood, which has for the last several decades been a significant force in Egyptian politics, which is entirely against the dictatorship. And of course, the dictatorship took power by overthrowing a democratically elected government of the Muslim Brotherhood. So again, even if they achieve a 5.5% GDP growth in 2022, which frankly sounds optimistic to me, Egypt is always a highly suspect country from the standpoint of its future possibilities in the political, social, and the economic sense. And it needs to be followed very, very carefully. Okay, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. I'm going to lump them together, with one exception, Oman. The World Bank forecasts between 4 and 6% growth for the various countries of the Gulf. The Gulf countries have low to non-existent debt, low unemployment. In fact, in terms of the citizens of the country, in most cases, no unemployment because a lot of the work is done in these countries by immigrants from Africa and Asia. There is a conscious effort led by the United Arab Emirates, particularly, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to diversify into high-tech areas and other industrial areas. And as a result of all of this, and the Abraham Accords with Bahrain and UAE being members of the Abraham Accords, and with the Saudis expected to join at some point, the outlook for the Gulf is very positive, unless, of course, the conflict with Iran heats up. And that is, of course, one of the main reasons for the Abraham Accords, along with the desire for diversification, with the relative reduction in the American presence in the Middle East. These countries are, in many cases, looking towards Israel for military cooperation with reference to standing up to Iran. Okay, in the Persian Gulf, we can talk about Yemen. Not the Persian Gulf, I'm sorry. In the Arabian Peninsula, we can talk about Yemen, which is a totally different situation. Yemen is a economic, political, and social disaster area. There is no statistical data because there's no functioning statistical agency in Yemen. But the situation is undoubtedly, the economic situation is undoubtedly terrible. And it certainly is in the extreme poverty situation without any doubt whatsoever. Okay, moving on then to north of the Arabian Peninsula. We can start with Israel. Israel is estimated by the World Bank to have 4.8% growth. It is in an excellent trade, financial, and unemployment situation. There are, however, important social divisions reflected in ongoing political stalemate, and the situation is dangerous. The fact that you have a large segment of the population that does not really participate in Israeli society. Some of it are the Muslim Arabs, or a substantial portion of the Muslim Arab. Some of it are the extreme Orthodox Jewish population. And there is also a recent advance in the extreme right in Israel. And it's had 6 elections in the last 2 years. And it's kind of 5 elections, and then the 6th is coming up in November. It may again result in no coalition being able to form a government, in which case there'll be a 7th election 6 months later. And if there is it might very well be formed by the rightists, including the extreme rightists. And that would lead to a very difficult political and social situation, both internally and in terms of Israeli foreign policy. So although the economic situation is excellent, the social and political situation is highly questionable. Okay, Jordan. The World Bank forecasts GDP, per capita GDP growth at 2.1%. Jordan has relatively low unemployment, but it has a high debt ratio and a negative commercial balance. It depends on Israel for electricity and water. It's essentially a poor country with serious social and potentially political problems. The monarchy is supported by the Bedouin population, but a majority of the population is of Palestinian origin. And basically, I would say that the Jordanian outlook is rather poor. I'm quite pessimistic about the future of Jordan, and that is very dangerous because that would mean that the terrorist organization could very well penetrate Jordan and take control of large areas of the country, and that would make Israel's situation more difficult than it is already with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. To have a serious terrorist presence in Jordan would make another front for the Israeli Defense Forces to have to try to deal with. Jordan is something that needs to be followed very, very carefully. All right, Lebanon. Lebanon is a basket case. The World Bank forecast is minus 6.5% growth in 2022. And that's not growth, of course, it's decline. It is socially and politically extremely unstable. It is dominated politically by the Iranian proxy terrorist group Hezbollah. There was a tremendous explosion in Beirut port a couple of years ago, and nothing's been done about that, either in terms of identifying who's responsible for it, or in terms of rebuilding for a country that is so dependent on commerce. This is a disaster, and a country that, in any case, was divided between Shia and Sunni Muslims, and a substantial Christian population, as well as a large Druze population. The Druze are Arabs, but they're not Muslims. This is a group that exists in several of the Middle Eastern countries. They're not found in North Africa, but the situation was always divided ethnically and religiously in Lebanon, and now the country is governed by terrorists. It survives as a result of Iranian support and international support, and it is certainly in a state of extreme poverty. Syria is another basket case. There is a situation of extreme poverty. There has now been an ongoing civil war for several years, with participation by various terrorist groups, as well as ethnic divisions with the Kurds, with the Sunni Muslims, the Shia Muslims who control the government, and foreign involvement, which none of it is helpful, particularly by Turkey, Russia, and Iran, as well as Israel in terms of attacking Iranian facilities in Syria. The Turks occupy various portions of northern Syria, and they support various groups that are in conflict with the government in Damascus. The Russians have a naval and air base on the coast of Syria. They want to protect those. For the first time in history, a Russian desire, which has been a goal of the Russians for centuries. They finally achieved that goal, but now they have to keep troops there in order to protect it because of the civil war that's been going on. And if they withdraw the troops, this will put their naval and air base in danger. But of course, there is a desire to pull them down in order to increase Russian troop levels in the war with the Ukraine. Okay, Turkey. The 2022 growth is estimated at 1.3% by the World Bank. There's high unemployment and poor trade and investment figures, and there is inflation bordering on hyperinflation. Turkey is a dictatorship masquerading as a democracy. The future is extremely uncertain. The dictator, Erdogan, is a extremely unpredictable person. And as a result, today he wants to make friends with Israel. Tomorrow he's attacking Israel. Today he wants to make friends with Iran. Tomorrow he's attacking Iran. The same thing is true right now. He's on a charm crusade, and Israel and Turkey have reestablished diplomatic relations. But the economic situation is terrible. Turkey, which is not typically a poor country, has a very bad economic situation, primarily due to the government's very bad economic policies, which continue. Among other things, the central bank has been forced to maintain very low interest rates, which is, of course, given hyperinflation, a very bad policy. Iraq. The World Bank estimated Iraqi growth to be for 2022 primarily because of the oil and gas price situation at almost 9%. That was prior, however, to the current political impasse. There is social, ethnic, and political unrest and instability. Despite all of that, Iraq has been able to maintain a semi-democratic political system, and this similar to Morocco. There is constant meddling by Iran through its proxy terrorist groups in Iraq. The northern area of the country is a Kurdish autonomous region. The western part of the country is Sunni Muslim. But if the anti-Iranian Shia Muslims party had been enabled to form a government, the outlook would have been rather good. At the present situation, it's not going to be anywhere near 9% economic growth in 2022, but it probably will be positive economic growth because of the price of oil and gas. But the political and social situation is extremely questionable. And then we come to Iran at the extreme east of the MENA region. The World Bank has no estimate of growth for 2022 because of the sanctions and because of lack of data. Much of Iranians' exports, for example, are not reported because of sanction evasion. It is the most repressive dictatorship in the MENA region, with a great deal of social and ethnic unrest. The future of Iran is highly uncertain, and why the United States and the government keeps trying to come to a so-called deal with Iran is absolutely incomprehensible, but it hasn't given up yet. For some reason, which is also fairly incomprehensible, the Iranians have not accepted this gift that the U.S. administration is trying to give it. But it's also possible that following the American elections, they will come to some kind of agreement, which God forbid. But in any case, the future of the Iranian regime is uncertain. And of course, Iran has the imminent possibility of becoming a nuclear power, which would, of course, be a very, very dangerous situation. It should be pointed out, however, before everybody panics, in case it does manage to take power, to develop a nuclear capacity, that it will be quite a long time before it has any substantial number of nuclear weapons and is able to deliver them on target. Nevertheless, it will certainly work on that, and it will be also working on the miniaturization of its nuclear capacity, which is an extreme danger, because then it could supply miniaturized nuclear weapons to its proxies in the Middle East, as well as its allies in the Middle East, such as the Syrian government. At any rate, it's a very mixed situation. In summary, then, the economic outlook for the MENA region is highly mixed. Very hopeful signs in the Gulf, but backsliding in Tunisia, Iraq, and Lebanon. No improvement in Syria, Yemen, or Libya, which are failed states or have been failed states in the case of Libya and probably will be again. The countries to watch in terms of what happens and which are questionable are Morocco, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Jordan. Again, the economic situation in Israel is excellent. Israel has significant social and political problems. Okay, Sean, let's see what questions and comments we may have.
Dr. Bailey, no questions so far, any of the Zoom or the Facebook, so I think we're good to keep going.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to mention a very interesting study that was published recently by an institute in Princeton University that studies the Arab countries, all of the Arab countries, and they include in the Arab countries some of the African countries such as Mauritania and Sudan, which I do not include in the MENA region. This study, which was about the popularity and influence of China versus the United States in the Arab world, in which they concluded that China, and this is done based on surveys. They interview 23,000, at least they say they do, 23,000 people in the various Arab countries, and draw their conclusions from the results of these surveys. That China is substantially better thought of in the Arab countries than the United States, but this situation is changing, not because of anything the U.S. is doing, but because of the Uyghur situation in China, where China is engaged in what some people call a genocide in the Western region, which is occupied by a Muslim people. And this is also the fact that many of the Arab countries have borrowed large amounts of money from China as part of the road initiative of China, but and a lot of it now the various countries are unable to repay. So this is creating a certain degree of hostility, and the conclusion is that China is losing popularity in the region, but the U.S. is not gaining much in terms of popularity. The big exception there is Morocco, incidentally. However, what I want to talk about is something that the study talks about, although it has nothing to do with China and the United States. It's very strange that all of a sudden first of all, that they ask the questions, and they're devoting a part of the publication to a subject that has nothing to do with China and U.S., but which is very important from our standpoint, and that is the popularity of the Abraham Accords in the Arab countries. And I'm going to read from the report. There is broad rejection among ordinary citizens across MENA of the US-backed Abraham Accords and a broader peace deal with Israel. Although at most about a quarter of citizens in the region say they follow news on this issue, a great deal or fair amount, including just 1 in 10 in Tunisia, Palestine, they consider Palestine a country, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. These peace agreements are widely rejected overall. In 8 of the 9 countries surveyed, fewer than 1 in 5 say they support normalization agreements with Israel, including fewer than 1 in 10 in Mauritania, Libya, Palestine, Jordan, and Egypt. Overall, in no country does even close to a majority of citizens favor normalization with Israel, which means the U.S. is strongly associated with a highly unpopular policy within MENA. This negative association is likely to continue hurting the popular image of the U.S. in the majority of countries across MENA. They consider their area of study to be MENA, even though they leave out all the non-Arab countries. They don't include Israel, Turkey, or Iran in their survey. This is astonishing, an astonishing conclusion, and I can only assume that it has something to do with the prejudices of the people who are doing the research, because it is clearly not true. And in terms of the popularity of the Abraham Accords in the countries which have signed Abraham Accords with Israel, they are wildly popular. And in some of the other countries, such as Saudi Arabia, which everybody is supposed to join in an Abraham Accord with Israel in the next couple of years, this will be also has a high level of popularity. So this amazing conclusion from a study by an institute in a highly prestigious American university is a prime example of the kind of misinformation and disinformation that is being disseminated now under the cover of academic research. Okay, Sean, any questions or comments?
No, it does not look like it, Dr. Bailey. So I think we are just about ready to wrap up.
Okay, then I'll see everybody next month for the last in the series, in which will be a general summary of the situation in the Middle East, North Africa.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Bailey. If you guys have any questions or interested in attending upcoming events, making a gift to IWP, or applying to one of our graduate programs, please feel free to visit iwp.edu. Thank you again, Dr. Bailey. And thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all for joining.